So I've been meaning to make more videos on stuff that I really like, but I've kind of struggled to put that stuff in words because, see, now I'm not as old as I was when I first watched it. I'm no longer a teenager. So I'm at this point where I'm sort of thinking about how different I interpret things. And, well, spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about Gintama. Now, Gintama, in my opinion, is a show that is made for people who are deep feelers, deep thinkers, and kind of want to live in this idealistic reality, where everybody is kind of what they say they are. Or even if they're not, honest about it, there is a moral code that every single character has where they're honest about who they are, who they represent, what kind of ideals that they're living by. You kind of know it from the looks of them. You kind of see them, and you see them sort of failing at being that perfect self, but they're still trying in their own way and failing. Now, if you haven't watched Gintama before, or you're new to anime and stuff like that, now this is an anime that I really, really recommend. This is one of the few examples where the anime is far superior to the manga. And again, I don't mean to discredit the manga and say that it's bad, because when I reread it, actually, I saw a lot of details in the manga panels that are not present in the anime, and that's kind of natural because you're animating stuff. So if there's like people and cats and dogs and stuff that's in the background, then it's easy to draw compared to animating it and kind of giving everything a voice, right? But still, if you were at this point, like 10 years ago when you were like searching about anime and manga, you must have run across stuff like, arcs that you can skip, or arcs where you can begin this show. A lot of people talk about Gintama. They say that, the first 50 episodes are kind of bearable, and then it gets good at, I think, 58. That's when the Benizakura arc begins. And really interesting about, this discussion of shows getting good after a particular episode or after a particular arc is that if you're watching a show because other people have recommended it and you don't like it, it means that you don't like it. See, it is true that at some point, if you're exposed to the same show for like a very, very long time, you're going to get used to it and you're going to really enjoy watching it, because now you're familiar with the dynamics. But some people aren't going to experience that. And to expect your friends to kind of adjust to whatever, show that you're watching after 20, 30 odd episodes is kind of risky. Because throughout that period, you're feeling like, oh, this show is really boring. Oh, this show is really boring. I'm waiting for it to get to this point. I'm waiting to skip episodes so I can get to this point where it's really good. And I think that is not productive at all. Just watch a show that you enjoy. But in any case, if you're still interested in this show and you kind of want to find out, then stick around. This arc is kind of the difference between Murata Tetsuya and Murata Tetsuko, who are the brother and sister if you don't know their names. Because, the girl has blue hair and the brother speaks really loudly. That's basically the two that I'm talking about. So, with Tetsuya, we're kind of shown this idealistic image of what an artisan should be. If you're a swordsmith, if you're making swords, and you kind of have to put everything in it, your heart and your soul in it, you need to let go of everything else, all your attachments, in order to be really proficient at what you're doing. And that's kind of one ideal, and that's kind of what a lot of people tend to go for. And in this situation, it's kind of a comparison between a man and a woman, where you're seeing that as a man, he's sort of expected to kind of take over his family business, and kind of succeed his father and surpass him. But this guy, despite all the efforts that he puts into his craft, he's not really able to get to the point where people really acknowledge him the same way they would his father. And then we talk about his sister, Tetsuko, who, she's not as dedicated to making swords as him. Like, Tetsuya basically loses his hearing for the most part because he keeps clanging the metals all the time. He's always striking metal. He's always doing that. He's always, quote unquote, refining his soul, as his father says. And despite that, he's not able to get at that level. The key point where we see the difference between the two characters is when Tetsuko is asked what her dream is, or what her perfect sword would look like. And she said that, I would build a sword that protects people. And that's a very common theme in anime and shows in general, to kind of, create something that is very humanitarian to kind of try to protect other people. That's kind of the idea that people want to sell. But at the same time, it kind of recontextualizes what the idea of a sword is. As they say in the show, the sword is just a big knife that you use to kill people. It's not really, a glamorous weapon that is like doing some great duty. At the end of the day, it is killing people. And this is very similar to the Tom and Frankie situation that happens in One Piece. I think it's in Water 7 or something. That's one of the scenes where you kind of see the backstory of Frankie and kind of how he became the way he is. And we see Tom sort of talking about how his job as a shipwright is to make ships. It's not to kind of think about, whether that is right or wrong. Because he, as the creator, his duty is to, take responsibility for his craft. That, yes, I made it, even if it's used for good or bad. And that, again, is like an extreme idealization of that concept. Because, you can create the worst thing imaginable and just, you shouldn't claim that. Or, well, you should claim that, but don't make that thing then, And so in the same way, we kind of talk about Benizakura being like this ultimate weapon that is created by her brother, but it's not actually created with the vision of saving it. Now, while Tetsuko's weapon is designed to protect, it's designed to stop her brother from getting into stuff that is too dangerous, the Benizakura is not really designed with that sort of purpose in mind. It's designed with the sole purpose of creating the perfect swordsman, or well, to combine the swordsman with the sword itself. So you can see the key difference, right? So on one hand, we have Gintoki taking over Tetsuko's sword, which is, it looks like the dragon coil is poop. That's the joke that's made there. And it doesn't really give him any special powers, and in the end of the arc, it does break. So it's not really a special weapon that she makes. But the intention that she makes it with is to protect people, to stop her brother from doing these evil things. On the other hand, you have the Benizakura, which has all these ultra cool superpowers, but at the same time, it takes over the will of the swordsman that is using it. And in that process, Nizo loses himself and has to be stopped by Gintoki. One of my favorite metaphors, and these are two metaphors for two different characters that are described in this arc. The first one is for Takasugi. So for Takasugi, he talks about moths and how they're attracted to a flame. He described a scenario where a moth is completely, blind to light. They can't see light. There's no light around them. And then they see this light flickering, and just that light traps them over there. The moth just wants to stay close to it. He describes Takasugi as a moth that is dancing around a bonfire as people are following him. And the fact is that when you're around a bonfire, and if you've seen a moth around a bonfire, then they usually catch fire because they're not really fast. So he kind of is dancing with the flame, which kind of gives into his idea of anarchy and trying to just, create absolute chaos. On the other hand, he talks about Gintoki, who is a very annoying light. It's very faint. It's silver. It's like steel. So again, steel in this scenario is a comparison to the soul of the samurai, which the Murata father, I guess, is what I'm going to call him now because I don't remember his name. But that's what he says about your soul. Your soul is the thing that you're beating. It's not the metal when you're trying to create a sword. The way he describes how you're supposed to forge yourself, live beautifully, is a really beautiful message, I think. And when he talks about Gintoki, he's sort of talking about this sword who is very persistent. Like, this light that Nizo sees in him is not very bright, but it's not faint enough that you can't really see it. It's just there. It's persistent. It's not flashy. And if you look at Gintoki as a character, he's not designed as the superhero like, let's say, Luffy. Again, Luffy doesn't really fit into the idea of being this superhero, I guess, more now than ever before. Let's compare him to a character like Goku, where you kind of see him and you're like, oh, this guy's going to save everybody. This guy is good, like he believes in good things. He's like Superman. But no, Gintoki is this guy who is shown to be unreliable. He doesn't really give a damn sometimes. Sometimes he just arrives late. Sometimes he doesn't care. The thing is that unlike all these other heroes who are kind of producing these high volume good actions every now and then, Gintoki is kind of present as the same person throughout the show. He's always the same person. And that's kind of what the metaphor tries to describe, that he's this person who's just there. Even when Nizo is fighting against him and he feels that he's winning and everything's gonna work out, even then Gintoki is a fucking pest because he keeps fighting him and in the end he wins. Not with a fancy sword, but a sword that was made with well-intentioned meaning behind it. That was a lot of words that did not need to be said in that order. That was not necessary. But still, you get what I mean. I guess to wrap up this video, I would say towards the end of the arc, one of the most beautiful things is said by Gintoki, where he replies to Tetsuko and Tetsuya, who are just having their final moments. And Tetsuya kind of tries to tell his sister that, see, I couldn't let go of every single thing. That's why Benizakura wasn't strong enough. That's why it couldn't stand up to Gintoki. But the reality is that Gintoki says, is that if you want to be an artisan, if you want to be an artist, if you want to be a swordsmith, if you want to be proficient at anything, you can be that. But that doesn't mean that you let go of everything else that you have. That doesn't mean you let go of your sister and start neglecting her, because she's the only family that you have in the world. If you're not able to take on everything at once, that's what's really happening in this situation. So for people who are sort of saying, hey, I can't do these things, I can't be in a relationship right now because I'm working or I'm doing this. Again, that's true to a certain degree, but for most cases, I would say 60% cases, and I'm making this number up completely, there's no science behind this, but 60% of the time when somebody says this, it's that they're not ready to take on several responsibilities at once and they kind of want to be in that space. And that's fine, but at the same time, it's not something to kind of moralize about or to feel superior about, like, oh, look at me, I'm so dedicated to swords that I don't take care of my sister, I don't listen to anybody, I'm just completely focused on this one thing, I don't care about my morals, I'm giving up this very incredibly dangerous weapon to this incredibly dangerous guy, Takasuki, who's basically going to destroy the world with it. I don't care as long as it succeeds. You don't need to do that. You can hold on to things, and those things that you hold on to make you stronger. Even in the final fight, where you kind of expect, or at least a younger me expected Gintoki to come out on top and, just like completely demolish Nizo, which he does, by the way. He does need help from Kaguda and Shinpachi throughout that fight, or at least towards the end when he's completely knocked out. There's even a point where Tetsuko has to intervene, where she has to kind of, prevent Nizo from really getting to him. And even Tetsuya, who ends up sacrificing himself. So it does show that, yes, if you're holding on to everything at once, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be messy, it's not going to be perfect, but you're still going to, have a result where you're happy in the end. If, somehow Tetsuya turned out to be right and his weapon worked out, that it was strong, it wasn't really going to make a good, positive change on the world. It was just going to destroy people. It was going to destroy lives. And that was what was prevented there. So I guess that's the lesson from this arc. You guys can check out Gintama if you want, or you can check out my channel. I'm going to be trying to make a lot more content and be consistent. So it would be really nice if you guys stick around and leave your comments, your views, your thoughts, and you can tell me about stuff that you want me to talk about more. But yeah, I'll be here. See you next time.